Merry Good Enough is a 2023 film directed by Caroline Keene and Dan Kennedy. It's written by Caroline Keene, and we have a cast including Raye Spielberg as Lucy. And I thought this was okay. It definitely was quite slow in places. I feel like it was a little bit longer than it needed to be. It's over an hour and a half, and I think we could have lost a good 20 minutes without losing any of the narrative. But other than that, I thought it was not too bad. Despite the merry in the title, I will say it's not the jolliest of Christmas films, but it absolutely didn't need to be. Lucy goes home for the holidays. She's not exactly a huge fan of Christmas, and she doesn't have the best relationship with her family. And at some point, her mother disappears. Nobody can get hold of her. She's not answering or returning any calls. And the film is generally a mystery about where she could possibly be. I will say, on the one hand, I won't say what happened. I won't give anything away. But on the one hand, I think we had some really good messages about how a person can feel not good enough, about having a lot of different emotions. I think it tackles some very believable emotions. We have a lot of very, I think, relatable thoughts and feelings for a lot of people. I think a lot of people will be able to connect with at least one character in this. And I think it does a really great job of that. But at the same time, I guess in terms of personal preference, it didn't go in a direction that I particularly cared for. So I think that's more on me rather than a problem with the film. But the point there is that I didn't find a lot of it to be as interesting as I personally perhaps could have done. But I do think they still raise a lot of really important points. The characters are very well written, very, very believable characters with some very realistic emotions. And as I said, I think most people will be able to connect with at least one character, and they'll be able to understand at least one character's perspective, which I think was done really, really well. With regards to the Christmas aspect, even though it's not a particularly merry film, we do have a lot of, I guess, traditional festive elements. We have some gorgeous Christmas decorations, outdoor lights. We have ice skating at one point. So there's plenty of Christmas in this, that it still feels like a Christmas film, even if it's not the most merry. And as I said, it doesn't need to be merry. It definitely works very well with what they were trying to achieve, or at least with what I think they were trying to achieve. And in general, I'd say it's a well-written narrative, definitely not completely to my personal preference. As we get kind of in the final third, it didn't go in a direction I was personally looking for, and also I do think it's quite slow in places. But that aside, it's still a decent story, very realistic characters. The characters are generally likeable. Sometimes I didn't care much for them, but that's not necessarily because they were badly written. In fact, quite the contrary. They have very realistic responses, and sometimes people are not the most likeable. But the performances were really good. Everything else worked really well. And in general, I'd say Merry Good Enough is a pretty decent film. It's kind of an easy watch. There are times when it's a little bit heavier, particularly if you can connect with certain emotions that characters are feeling. But in general, it's not the heaviest watch. So if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit different, but not too heavy, while still being thought-provoking, then I'd say Merry Good Enough is a good one to go with.